Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Well, Blitz Week is officially over, although many say that Blitz Week actually starts the week after it is scheduled, but nevertheless, it is officially over. However, there are some lingering effects. Now, many freight brokers have turned to Reddit in order to voice their grievances about this particular Blitz Week, and some of those posts were pretty funny. Like this one, for example, really made me chuckle. Now, it's not just in my experience. I'm sure that many of you will agree with me that this year's Blitz Week was a little bit different. It felt a little bit different, and it seems like it had a more profound effect. The question is why, and what does this mean for the future? So let's get into it. Ready? Let's go! So first and foremost, it has been speculated over the past week by a lot of people in this industry, including freight brokers, carriers, and even shippers, that more carriers sat this one out. One broker even posted on X that his customer, he was on the phone with his customer, and his customer said that this is the worst Blitz Week that he has ever seen, and he has been in the game for a very long time. And you know what? I can't say that this is just speculation, because FreightWaves posted an article where they looked at the data, and they found that the OTRI, which is the Outbound Tender Rejection Index, jumped from 5.21% to 6.48% during Roadcheck week. Now, that is a very high spike considering the period of time that it happened in, and this just shows that more carriers said no way to loads during that week. So let's assume that this is actually true, that more carriers sat this one out. And the question is, why? First of all, the freight market, as we all know, has been a pretty tough place to make a buck. And over the past 3 months before Roadcheck, actually spot rates tanked about 8%, meaning that drivers were scraping by on thinner margins. And when you're already stretched that thin, the last thing you need is an out-of-service order that is going to result in either a fine or some kind of money in order to get your truck back into service, or lost time because you are not able to move until that out-of-service order, the thing that caused it, is corrected. And then there are other possibilities I was thinking about when trying to understand why more people sat this one out. Number one, folks have been operating on barely nothing for the past 3 years. They haven't seen any real profit margin. So the question is, do they really have the money to maintain their truck to the standard that is required by Blitz Week? Or do they want to risk being put out of service for a lack of maintenance because they simply did not have money? Number two is, of course, the fact that there was a growing fear that this year there would be a really strong focus on English language proficiency, even though it was not part of the official Blitz Week flyer. But people were afraid, and they didn't consider the fact that it's not yet an out-of-service order. It is a violation, though. And number three, of course, is the fact that this year Blitz Week did focus on hours of service, which I'm sure scared some folks away. But it's not just about dodging those inspections. The market is on a knife's edge right now. Capacity is so sensitive that even a small drop in trucks, like for example during Blitz Week, can send rejections through the roof. And this year's outbound rejection index spike was much sharper than the one last year, and that's a big deal already. Now, something we should also mention that doesn't really have anything to do with Blitz Week in particular, but it just happens to be happening at the same time, and that's the tariff uncertainty. As we all know, there's a 90-day pause on tariffs, and shippers are rushing to flood the market with goods. Now, I'm going to quote this: container bookings from China to the US spiked nearly 300% this week compared to a week earlier, which is insane. This is something I wanted to mention to get into the next point, which is what is going to happen next. Well, let's talk about what is already happening. The thing is, everyone thinks that Blitz Week is something that the market just shrugs off once it's done. But this year, that is not quite the case. This year, in part, those effects are sticking around. As FreightWaves stated, and I quote, What makes this year's Roadcheck response particularly notable is that these elevated rejection rates have persisted beyond the inspection period itself. The sustained tightening indicates that this is potentially the most vulnerable the truckload market has been in years, despite broader economic concerns. All right, now let's look into the future a little bit and pretend we have a crystal ball and speculate. There are two big changes that are shaking up the freight market, the trucking industry right now. Number one is the pause, the 90-day pause on tariffs. Number two is the English language proficiency requirement that is set to hit the out-of-service criteria on June 25th of this year. Now, when the pause happened on tariffs, shippers saw this as an opportunity, even though some people were saying this is not going to happen. Shippers did see this as an opportunity to start front-loading freight. And the reason is because no one is really certain what will happen after that 90-day period is over. And then on the other side, we have this English language proficiency requirement, which some people believe is going to sideline quite a few drivers, because if it's back on the out of service criteria, how is that driver going to get back into service without learning English? Now, this theoretically should tighten capacity. The kicker though, and this is something you guys mentioned, and you are correct, I think, by the time those ships hit the US with that product that shippers are front loading in a panic right now, that's going to be about the same time that English language proficiency goes back on the out of service criteria. So what do we have? We have a situation where potentially volumes are going to go up and capacity is going to shrink. So it's kind of a double whammy. So yeah, guys, at the core, what Blitz Week this year did was it uncovered just how sensitive the freight market is. And considering what's going to happen with volumes potentially and capacity, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting few months. Now, I know that not all of you will agree with me right away about the fact that Blitz Week did have a pretty significant effect, because I know that some of you did not experience any increase in rates during that week. And because I was in both positions kind of last week, I started off in Arizona and then we ended up in the Midwest and the South. I know that this was felt more in areas that historically have more loads for your type of equipment. But regardless, I have a question for you. Considering this idea that shippers are currently front loading and panicking and kind of getting as much product as possible, and considering the fact that June 25th is the deadline for that out of service order, what do you see in the future? And if it's something good, do you think it's going to be something that becomes the new normal? Like it's going to be not permanently good, because we know that the market changes constantly, but is it going to be the new normal? Or is it just going to be kind of a temporary boost? And if you're one of those people who look at the future and say that, you know what, nothing is going to change, I would love to hear your thought process as to why you think that is. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining and watching today. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning. See you in the next video.